Praise the Lord. We welcome you to the broadcast ministries of Victory Apostolic Church, where Elder Andrew D. Singleton Jr. is the senior pastor. At Victory, we are committed to building victorious Christ-like lives through the worshiping and glorifying of God to transform the lives of all we minister to.
Elijah rock, shout, shout. Elijah rock, coming up the Lord.
You've entrusted us to keep your word as you had it in your hand.
Oh Lord, we didn't keep our end. We need to hear you again. Heal the land for every born and girl. Heal the land.
All over
Ernest Green is a 34-year veteran on Wall Street, manager director of Lehman Brothers and then Barclays Bank. You're going to hear a lot about him besides desegregating the school. We had an affair with him last night, and thank you, Calvin. The food was great. The fellowship was great. And before I go any further, we also not only enjoy Ernest Green, we got to enjoy his lovely wife. Phyllis, why don't you stand? And I told him as a part of his presentation, go back to his room, pray a little more, and make sure he includes some of the things he has gone through during this recession, how he overcame even that. He was cited 11 times by Black Enterprise as one of the 25 most powerful blacks on Wall Street. He was appointed chairman of the African Development Foundation by President Clinton, also appointed by Secretary of Education Richard Riley to serve as chairman of the Historically Black Colleges and Universities Capital Financing Advisory Board. He told me when he gave me, he said, don't read all this. It's 2 pages long. So I can't read all of it, but I am lifting some things out that you need to hear. He has served as Assistant Secretary of Labor for Employment and Training during the Carter administration. He was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, 1941, earned his high school diploma from Central High School in Little Rock. And the first black senior to graduate from that school. He and 8 other black students were the first to integrate Central High following the 1954 United States Supreme Court decision in versus Board of Education that declared segregation illegal. They later would be known as the Little Rock Nine. He received, now hear me young people who don't want to go to school, don't want to do it, he has his Bachelor of Science in Social Science, a Master's in Sociology from Michigan State University, has received multiple honorary degrees. He presently serves on the board of directors at Fisk University, Quality Education for Minorities Network, Clark, Atlanta University Board of Trustees, a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. I told you it goes on and on. On November 9th, 1999, he, along with the other 8 students, were presented by President Clinton with the highest honor this nation gives to a civilian, the Congressional Gold Medal, for his outstanding bravery during the integration of Little Rock Central High School in 1957. He's written multiple books. Stand to your feet and receive Ernest Green.
As I said, some 60 years ago, in the back of this Army Jeep, as we were going to Central High, I didn't believe that I'd still be talking about high school graduation 60 years later. You know that making history is not something we aspire to. We wanted the best education that our parents' taxes could afford. We wanted what the Constitution says we have a right to, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I saw education as part of that right. Now, growing up in the South, it was in many ways not a safe place for a young black boy. Some of you are old enough to remember that picture of Jet magazine, the summer of 1955, of Emmett Till's brutal slaying. And those photos of his beaten and mutilated body were forever seared in my mind. They had attempted to beat humanity out of Till's body. They had beaten him into the shining example they wanted him to become, the example that would be frightful to any other black boy. The year-long siege of the Montgomery bus boycott, which concluded less than a year earlier, had swelled the ranks of the White Citizens Council. The council sometimes resorted to violence, bombing, physical attacks when they felt their hateful words were not doing the job. You know that beatings and lynchings were a common occurrence in the South for young black men, and it always hung in my head as a looming fate if I went the wrong place at the wrong time. I was the wrong color, and it was a war zone, and we black people were perceived the enemy. To treat my color caused to ignorant minds set in the back of my brain a constant reminder that I had to carry myself a certain way as not to project a threat. And after the Brown decision, segregationists vowed that blood would flow in the streets before integration took place. Now, back in September of that 57, we gathered at the table. My grandfather, Eugene Scott, blessed the food, and we all dug in. Surprisingly, though, my anticipation of activities that next morning were at the forefront of my mind. My bottomless appetite had not diminished. After dinner, my brother and I, my younger brother, we had cleared the table, washed the dishes, and my mother called me to watch television. She said, "Come quickly." I heard the television announcer say, "We're interrupting the regular scheduled program to bring an announcement from the governor of Arkansas, Orville Faubus." I could see the concerned look on my mother and grandfather's faces. Every line in their furrowed brows spoke volumes. You know that look when your parents had something that they really didn't want to talk about, but a concern for their child. And at that moment, I felt like I was ascending a roller coaster. The anxiety of what lay on one side felt like lead, and fear were having a war in my stomach. But the anticipation of what was coming to me, I didn't want to turn back. And as I listened to the governor's words, I realized this was about to be a different first day of school that I had ever encountered. On that evening of September 3rd, 1957, Governor Faubus delivered a major address. He said, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the television and radio audience. In view of the decision I have made, I think it is well to review for the people of the state and the nation some of the background in the tense situation which has developed at Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas." And he went on, as politicians do, to describe Arkansas as a liberal, progressive state. He then laid out all of the progressive programs and how black people were treated. But it was the last minute of that address which sent me into a free fall. He said there's evidence of disorder and threats of disorder which could have but one inevitable result. That is violence, which can lead to injury and harm to persons and property. The good governor further stated, "I therefore, in accordance with the solemn responsibilities and my oath of office, have made the decision to act and to act now, and it is only good judgment to act before the situation gets out of hand." He said all of that to say that he was calling out units of the National Guard. They have been mobilized around the school, and that the inevitable conclusion therefore must be that the schools in Pulaski County, for the time being, must be operated on the same basis as they have been operated in the past. I appeal now for good citizens to continue as people of Arkansas upon the road of progress, and that public peace will be preserved. So there it was, the governor of Arkansas deploying the National Guard to support the segregationists and keep us out of the first day of school on September 4th. Governor Faubus was activating the Arkansas National Guard to maintain calm in the city because he heard that youth were buying an unusual number of weapons in Little Rock, Arkansas. And no matter how you sliced it, Governor Faubus planned to defy the federal district court and refused to comply with the law of the land. But shortly after the governor's address rang, It was Mrs. Bates, Daisy Bates, president of the Little Rock NAACP and coordinator of our group. She wanted the kids and members of the clergy to gather at her house the next morning and travel to school together. You see, many white citizens who supported desegregation stepped back. In fact, even within the black community, opinions varied. It was debated in barbershops, beauty shops, grocery stores, and over the backyard clothesline. Some felt we needed to back off. You know the message. It was a day I had a neighbor who I cut his grass, and I assumed he called me over, and I assumed he wanted to talk to me and give me encouragement and inspiration. And instead, he admonished me for making waves. He said, "Ernie, we got it good here in Little Rock. You all got to stop this. Your mother's a school teacher. She owns her own house. Why do you want to mess that up? Integration will come in time. Let things be," he said. "Why do you kids have to go and do all this?" And I want to point out that this has always been a youth movement, whether it was in Little Rock or in Birmingham or even today in Florida. That it's a youth movement. In fact, he said, "Why do you kids have to go and do all this? You're just going to get these white folks mad, making it harder for the rest of us. You're going to leave here and go away to college, and we'll be stuck with the problem." His words surprised and stung. I naively thought we had everyone's support, even some of my peers, and I know that there are students in this audience today that say, you know, "Why do you want to go to school with them? Don't you think you're too good for Horace Mann, or worse, you think you're white now?" And every so often, God calls on people to be a part of a miraculous movement. You know that the miracle isn't meant for the person involved, rather it's to impact those observing the miracle. I remember that first day riding to school, seeing those angry faces, screaming, spitting, cursing, banging on cars that held us. And I look back on that moment, that angry mob seems just out of control. I remember the cars getting us into the buildings, thinking that the worst was over, but really that was just the tip of the iceberg. God knew we had faith in him and that we saw the win-win situation because of the strong internal foundation our parents helped us to build. We were figuratively being bound and thrown in the furnace to the observations of millions all over the world. But after September 4th, when we were denied admittance, I did what my parents taught me. I dug my heels in. The Bible says, "Weeping endures for a night, and joy cometh in the morning." Now you have to figure that 250 days was a long night. The recent cover of a magazine in Little Rock, when we were down for the 60th anniversary, said Arkansas was progress, but with a question mark. Progress is not a singular action, a moment. Young people, it's the small, mundane, everyday action. Some days with international focus, other days with no more fanfare than a small thank you. Progress is like a water torture on the unrelenting enemy of stagnancy and complacency. Initially, it feels like nothing more than tiny droplets of water, and after a while, it beats away at hate and vile rhetoric, not as rushing water, but still as seemingly small droplets. Progress has to continue because there is no finish line with progress. I know that many of you sitting here can think about what you would have done as a 16-year-old. You see Facebook Live videos of police brutality. You hear pervasive Islamic, racist, sexist, homophobic, hate speeches being thrown around like casual phrases. You may feel impotent and helpless at times. How you make a difference. I was in that same place. I was 16 and couldn't fathom changing the world. I remember the body of Emmett Till because it was a vivid, stark reminder of my societal limitations. Just like I'm sure you all can name the first time you looked the image of someone that by the grace of God wasn't you. A life cut too short by misunderstanding, closed-minded judgment, and prejudice. Emmett Till turns to slain Douglas High School students in Florida. Muhammad Ali turns to Colin Kaepernick, taking a knee for injustice. The Little Rock Nine turned to the Charleston Nine, paying the ultimate sacrifice for peacefully assembling in a church for Bible study in the edifice of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. That scared many people because of its proud black heritage. Now today we need young lawyers like Thurgood Marshall. We need community activists and church leaders like Daisy and Elsie Bates to continue to engage and challenge officials everywhere. We need parents and caregivers who are actively engaged in the education of their children, like Lothair Scott Green and all the parents of the Nine. And I want our children to know they have a continued role in this marathon to progress. Be prepared to take up the mantle of the Little Rock Nine. Malala Yousafzai, who was a young woman that the Taliban threatened, shot her in the head. She now has received the Nobel Peace Prize. We have to continue to remember that education is an important key to our upward mobility. Now, what's harder than talking with people that don't agree with you, standing up for people you don't even know that are being disrespected? In the wild, when zebras are at a watering hole and one of them gets attacked, the rest of the zebras keep their heads down and continue to drink water, seemingly unfazed. And while a lion is mauling and attacking one of their own, the other members of the herd ignore it because they are not the ones being attacked. I heard a story on CNN about a waiter in a New York City restaurant who refused service to a table of patrons who were making fun of a family with a Down syndrome child. The waiter saw it as an unkind act and without fear of retribution, of losing his tip, and sailed did the right thing. He chose not to be a zebra. He didn't stand by and ignore the problem or think it's not my problem, that someone else will help out. And I ask you all, after this day, not to be zebras. Don't stand to the side with your head down. When you see something, say something. In our current climate, it's easy to put your head down and say, not my problem. If you have the ability to step in to provide support and safety for another, take it. You have a choice as how you are remembered in history. Will you be a major player for time compared to being a footnote of inaction? Now, I may have been the first to graduate of the Little Rock Nine, but I didn't cross that stage for myself. I crossed that stage for my 8 compatriots: Thelma Mothershed Ware, Minnie Jean Brown Trickey, Jefferson Thomas, Carlotta Walls Lanier, Gloria Ray Carlsmark, Melba Patilla Bills, and Terrence Roberts. They all still graduated on that horizon. and regardless of where they graduated from high school, because the next year the governor closed all high schools in Little Rock. I crossed the stage, I accepted that diploma. I had Dr. Martin Luther King sitting in the audience with my family. That diploma represented the next 808,000, 8 million that will follow in that long line. Now, I have learned in 60 years since Central High that there are different paths in life one can take. There are very worn paths, there are faint paths, there are the random footprints that don't follow anything. Know that those paths were worn in not by one person, not by 9, but by generations of people following scattered footprints left by someone else. But also know that the footprints following no path at all may intrigue someone else to follow a path not yet forged. No, it won't be easy. It won't happen overnight, but as many follow a path will wear into a permanent reminder of someone else's initial steps. Dr. King said that the arc of justice bends towards freedom. And as we close this Black History Month, we have the ability to recognize this history all year, not just one month. This April 4th, we'll recognize 50 years since Dr. King's assassination. And as we ponder the great issues, gun control, voter registration, the economy, the recognition of our communities as important players, we have one thing to remember. This struggle still continues. Thank you. God bless each of you.
Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to worshiping with you at either our 9 a.m. or 11:30 a.m. Sunday services that are biblically based, illustrated, contemporary, and timely. Our services cater to men, women, the young, and young at heart. We also invite you to join us for Tuesday night Bible study at 7:45 p.m. and Lunch on the Word on Wednesdays at noon. We are so thankful for your continued support of this ministry. And if this excerpt from our service touched your heart to either give financially to the ministry or to purchase the entire worship service on either CD or DVD, please call 708-283-0383 or visit us online at www.victoryapostolicchurch.org.